The SEAL captain's voice sliced through the tension like a blade. "Is there a combat pilot here?" The room fell instantly silent. Every man and woman froze in place. Eyes darted around nervously. No one answered. The question hung in the air, thick and heavy, as if waiting for a miracle. The mission was slipping away fast. The team was counting on someone to step up, but all they had was silence. Then, almost unnoticed, a quiet movement. Lieutenant Emily Carter slowly stood, her expression calm but determined. The room seemed to hold its breath. Everyone had seen her before, but few expected her to answer this call. Emily wasn't loud or flashy. She didn't seek attention. But beneath her composed exterior was a fighter who had spent years preparing for exactly this moment. The captain's sharp eyes locked onto her. "You?" he asked, voice edged with surprise and maybe a bit of doubt. Emily nodded. "Yes, sir. I'm a combat pilot." The weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders instantly. The mission was critical. An enemy stronghold was preparing to launch an attack that could cost lives, innocent lives. The airstrike was their only chance to stop it, but their primary pilot was unreachable. Without a skilled pilot, the team was vulnerable. Emily's mind raced, but her voice stayed steady. "I can do it." The room still buzzed with unease. She knew what they were thinking. How could a woman, one of the few female combat pilots in this unit, handle this? Years ago, she had faced that doubt every day. Every training exercise, every mission simulation, was a silent battle against prejudice and expectation. But she had learned to focus on what mattered most: skill, precision, and courage. The captain's eyes narrowed. This is no ordinary mission. Enemy air defenses are tight. You'll have to fly low, fast, and precise. We're counting on you. Emily met his gaze without hesitation. "Understood, sir." She moved toward the gear room, the weight of her flight suit and helmet a familiar comfort. Her hands were steady as she prepared, but inside, adrenaline surged. There was no room for error. Minutes later, Emily was strapped into the cockpit of the jet. The engine hummed beneath her, a steady pulse she had come to know like her own heartbeat. The mission details ran through her mind: coordinates, timing, enemy radar locations. The team below was counting on her to strike first and hard. Outside, the sky was overcast, the low clouds making navigation more challenging. Perfect cover, but perfect danger. Her radio crackled. The captain's voice came through, tense but controlled. "Emily, this is your go. Get in, get out. Watch your six." She acknowledged the command. The jet rolled forward on the runway, then lifted into the air with a powerful thrust. As the ground fell away beneath her, Emily felt the familiar mix of fear and focus. This wasn't just a training exercise. This was real. She adjusted the controls, her eyes scanning the instruments and the gray sky ahead. Enemy radar was active. She switched to a lower altitude, skimming above the treetops, the cold wind buffeting the cockpit. Every second counted. The target was deep in hostile territory. One wrong move, and it would be her last flight. Memories flickered in her mind. Countless hours spent in simulators, the grueling physical training, the cold nights spent studying maps and enemy tactics. She remembered the looks of surprise when she first joined the unit, the whispered doubts. But she pushed through, proving her skill with every sortie. Now, all those moments had led her here. Ahead, the radar blipped warnings of incoming threats. Missiles could launch at any moment. Emily's hands tightened on the controls. She focused on the instruments, the quiet hum of the jet, and the mission. Her voice was calm over the radio. Target in sight. Preparing for strike. The enemy defenses reacted quickly. Anti-aircraft fire lit the sky with deadly tracer rounds. The cockpit shook violently. Emily adjusted her flight path, dodging and weaving through a storm of fire. Every maneuver was a dance with death. Her mind sharpened. instincts taking over as she guided the jet closer to the target. In the silence of the cockpit, with only the roar of the engine and the crackle of gunfire, Emily felt something deeper, an unbreakable resolve. She wasn't just fighting for herself or even for the mission. She was fighting for her team, for every soldier counting on her from below. She steadied the jet, lined up the strike, and released the payload. A moment later, a massive explosion rocked the area. The strike hit its mark. Relief flooded through her, but the mission wasn't over yet. The return flight awaited, and the enemy would be watching. Emily took a deep breath, eyes forward, hands steady on the controls. She was a combat pilot now, in every sense of the word. And this was only the beginning. The hum of the jet faded as Emily touched down on the airstrip. The ground crew moved swiftly, but she barely noticed. Her mind was still in the sky, replaying every second of the mission. Sweat clung to her brow, beneath her helmet, but she didn't wipe it away. She knew this was only the first step. The SEAL captain's eyes met hers as she climbed out of the cockpit. There was no fanfare, just a steady, scrutinizing gaze. "You did well up there," he said quietly. But beneath those words was something deeper, surprise and respect, earned in silence. Emily's thoughts drifted back to the moments before the mission, when doubt had hung heavy in the room. She had felt it too, the weight of being the exception, the woman in a man's world. From the start, people had questioned if she belonged. Some whispered behind her back. Others openly doubted her skill. But she had learned to let her actions speak louder than their words. And today, she had flown through fire to prove exactly that. The captain gathered the team for a quick debrief. Voices were low, eyes serious. "We couldn't have pulled this off without you, Lieutenant," he said, his tone carrying the unspoken truth. Emily nodded, feeling the tight knot of tension in her chest loosen just a little. The enemy's forces had been pushed back, but the threat was far from over. There was no time to rest. As the team dispersed, Emily found a quiet corner and sat down. Her hands trembled slightly as she pulled off her helmet. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by exhaustion and a gnawing awareness of what lay ahead. She thought about her family back home, their pride, their worry. She had chosen this path, knowing the risks. Every mission was a gamble with life itself. Her phone buzzed with a message. It was from her younger sister, who had always been her biggest supporter. "I'm so proud of you," the text read. Emily smiled faintly but didn't reply immediately. Words couldn't capture the storm of emotions inside her. The fear, the relief, the resolve. Later, in the briefing room, the captain outlined the next phase of the operation. Enemy forces were regrouping. Intelligence suggested another strike might be needed soon. Emily listened carefully. The mission would require even more precision and courage. She was no longer just a pilot. She was a crucial piece in a deadly chess game. The room was thick with unspoken tension. Everyone knew what was at stake. For Emily, it was more than just duty, it was personal. She had fought hard for every opportunity, every chance to prove herself. Today, she had taken a step closer to being seen as an equal, not just another woman in uniform. Her thoughts turned to the men she fought alongside. They were tough, experienced, battle-hardened. Some had been skeptical of her abilities, but today had changed that. Today, she had earned their respect. She wasn't just a pilot, they needed her. And that realization gave her strength. That night, Emily lay awake, the sounds of the base humming around her. Her mind replayed the mission, every twist and turn. The fear had not disappeared, it was part of the job. But so was the pride in knowing she had answered the call when it mattered most. She thought about the future, of missions yet to come, of battles yet to be fought. The road ahead would be tough, full of danger and doubt. But she was ready. She had faced the silence, and now she was standing firmly in the storm. Morning came, cold and gray. Emily prepared once more, slipping into her flight suit. The weight of her helmet in her hands reminded her of everything she carried. Not just the gear, but the responsibility of every life counting on her skill and courage. The SEAL captain approached again, nodding with quiet approval. No words were necessary. They shared a look that said more than any briefing could. Together, they would face whatever came next. Emily took a deep breath, stepped toward the jet, and climbed in. The sky awaited, and so did the mission. The engines roared to life as Emily strapped herself into the cockpit once again. The mission was far from over. The SEAL captain's words echoed in her mind. The enemy was regrouping, and another strike was crucial. The stakes were higher this time. No room for mistakes. The jet vibrated beneath her, a familiar rhythm that steadied her nerves. She took a deep breath, eyes scanning the instruments, every detail etched into her memory from countless hours of training. The sky was thick with heavy clouds, making visibility a challenge. Emily adjusted her altitude, gliding just above the tree line. The enemy's radar was more active now, signaling that they were aware of her presence. She tightened her grip on the controls, feeling the jet respond instantly to her commands. This wasn't just a flight. It was a deadly game of cat and mouse. Every move could mean the difference between life and death. Her radio crackled, and the captain's voice came through, steady but tense. Emily, intel confirms multiple enemy positions around the target. They're expecting another strike. Be prepared for heavy resistance. Emily's jaw tightened. The mission demanded absolute precision and nerves of steel. She acknowledged the message, her voice calm. Copy that, Captain. Ready to proceed. As she neared the target zone, the first warning alarms blared inside the cockpit. Missile locks. The enemy's anti-aircraft defenses had kicked into high gear. Emily's heart pounded, but her hands were steady. Years of training kicked in as she pushed the jet into evasive maneuvers, diving and weaving through a storm of tracer fire. The cockpit shook violently, but she stayed focused. Losing control wasn't an option. Suddenly, her targeting system flickered, a critical malfunction. The warning lights flashed urgently. For a moment, panic threatened to creep in, but Emily forced it down. She was trained for this. Manual override. She flipped the switches, taking full control. Her eyes narrowed, focusing on the enemy installations below. She had one shot. Time seemed to slow as she lined up the strike manually. The hum of the engine and the crackle of gunfire faded into the background. All that mattered was the target, the crosshairs, the mission. Emily steadied her breathing, calculating distance, speed, and wind. She released the payload. A thunderous explosion erupted below, shaking the ground and sending smoke billowing into the sky. The strike was a success, but danger was far from over. Enemy fighters scrambled to intercept her. The radio buzzed with frantic calls. Emily's pulse quickened. She banked sharply, diving toward the clouds for cover. The enemy jets pursued relentlessly. The sky became a chaotic battlefield, tracer rounds streaking past her cockpit like deadly arrows. Emily's training took over completely. She executed tight turns, sudden climbs, and dives to evade her pursuers. Each maneuver demanded split-second decisions. One mistake, one hesitation, and it could be fatal. Her mind was razor-sharp, calculating trajectories, speeds, and distances with precision. In a daring move, she pulled into a steep dive, disappearing into the thick cloud cover. The enemy jets followed, but visibility was nearly zero. Emily pushed the jet's limits, banking hard just as she broke through the clouds. Enemy fighters lost sight of her in the sudden shift. She was free. Radio silence filled the cockpit. Emily's breath was heavy but controlled. The mission had been brutal, but she had survived. Her eyes flicked to the fuel gauge. Limited reserves meant no time for celebration. She had to get back, and fast. As she turned toward base, a new realization settled in. She was no longer just a pilot proving herself. She was a vital part of this team's survival. The respect of the SEALs, once hesitant, was now evident in every word and glance. The landing was smooth but tense. The ground crew was ready, awaiting her return. The captain approached, his expression unreadable. Then, a rare smile broke across his face. "You handled that like a seasoned veteran, Lieutenant. Well done." Emily nodded quietly. No words were needed. She had flown into the storm, faced death head-on, and come back stronger. The mission was far from over, but one thing was clear. She had earned her place. The hangar was dim, lit only by the flicker of overhead lights and the glow from computer screens. Emily sat alone, the flight helmet resting on her lap. The silence around her was a stark contrast to the chaos of the skies she had just left behind. Her mind drifted back to those early days, when every step forward felt like pushing through a storm. She remembered the first time she stepped onto the base as a cadet. The cold stares, the whispered doubts. Many had questioned whether a woman belonged in this world of fighter jets and frontline missions. She could still hear the voice of a senior pilot, cold and dismissive, telling her, "This isn't a place for someone like you." But Emily had never let those words define her. Instead, they became fuel for the fire burning inside her. Her training was grueling. Long days in simulators, hours of physical conditioning, and the relentless push to master every aspect of flying. There were moments when she wanted to quit, when the weight of expectation felt unbearable. But giving up was never an option. Not when lives depended on her skills, not when she wanted to prove to herself and everyone else that she was capable. She thought about the nights spent poring over maps and mission plans, memorizing enemy tactics and terrain details. Those hours alone, often while others were resting, built the foundation for what she had just accomplished in the sky. The technical jargon, the split-second decisions, the cold logic, it was all part of a bigger picture she had to understand perfectly. Her mind shifted to the comrades she fought alongside, the SEALs who relied on her every time she took off. These men had faced combat for years, their eyes hardened by experience. At first, some had doubted her ability to survive a mission, but respect was earned in the quiet moments, through action rather than words. The nods of approval she now received were proof of that. Emily's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps. The SEAL captain approached quietly, his face unreadable. He stopped beside her and looked out across the hangar. "You flew well," he said simply. "More than well. You showed them all that you belong here." She met his eyes, searching for any hint of praise or approval. Instead, she found something deeper, a grudging respect that took longer to earn than any medal. It was clear that from now on, she was no longer just the woman pilot. She was a trusted warrior, a key part of the team. The captain's gaze lingered. "There's a lot more to come. You need to be ready. This isn't over." Emily nodded. She already knew that. The battles ahead would be tougher, the risks greater. But she felt ready. The fear she once carried had transformed into quiet strength. The doubts from others were fading, replaced by something far more powerful, her own unwavering belief. She stood up, the weight of her flight suit grounding her in the moment. Every scar, every bruise, every sleepless night had brought her here. The jet outside waited silently, a sleek reminder of the challenge and responsibility she had accepted. As she walked toward the aircraft, Emily's mind was sharp, her focus clear. She was no longer just surviving a storm. She was learning to command it. The sky wasn't just a battlefield anymore. It was where she belonged, where her courage, skill, and determination would shape the fate of those she vowed to protect. Her fingers brushed the metal of the cockpit as she climbed in. The familiar hum of the engine filled her ears. She took a deep breath and prepared to face whatever came next, because she was ready. Always ready. The dawn broke cold and sharp, casting long shadows across the airbase. Emily stood by her jet, the morning chill biting through her flight suit. Today was different. The intelligence was clear. Enemy forces were preparing a massive counterattack. This mission would test everything she had learned, everything she was. The SEAL captain's briefing was brief but heavy with urgency. "This isn't a training exercise," he said. "You're leading a strike team. Precision is critical. One mistake, and the entire unit could be compromised." Emily nodded, her jaw set with determination. There was no room for doubt now. The men and women relying on her were depending on her skill and resolve. The jet engines roared as she climbed inside, the cockpit sealing her in like a second skin. She ran through her pre-flight checks with practiced precision, her mind sharp and clear. The weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders, but she welcomed it. As the jet lifted off, Emily felt the familiar surge of adrenaline mixed with a calm focus. The sky ahead was a battlefield. Enemy radar was alive with activity, and anti-aircraft defenses bristled like a deadly crown. She steered the jet low, skimming the treetops to avoid detection. The radio was alive with chatter, updates, warnings, commands, but Emily filtered it all through the lens of experience. Every sound, every word mattered. Suddenly, the cockpit alarms blared. Missile locks. Emily's heart raced, but her hands moved instinctively. She rolled the jet hard to the left, plummeting into a narrow valley where radar coverage was patchy. Tracer rounds tore through the sky around her, the deadly ballet of war unfolding in real time. Her vision narrowed, every muscle coiled for action. Enemy fighters appeared on her radar, closing in fast. Emily locked onto one, her finger tightening on the trigger. Missiles launched, streaking through the sky like fiery comets. The enemy jets twisted and turned in a desperate attempt to evade. Emily stayed locked, refusing to let them escape. One by one, the threats were neutralized. But the fight was far from over. Her targeting system flickered again, a sign of damage from enemy fire. She cursed under her breath, but refused to panic. Years of training kicked in as she switched to manual controls, relying on her instincts. The target was coming into view, an enemy supply depot critical to their operation. Destroying it could turn the tide. Emily took a deep breath and steadied the jet. The crosshairs locked on. She released the payload, watching as a massive explosion erupted below. Flames and smoke billowed into the sky, the destruction undeniable. The strike had hit its mark, but the enemy responded immediately. Flak burst around her, shaking the jet violently. Emily banked hard, weaving through the deadly barrage. Her mind raced, fuel was running low, and the return path was heavily guarded. She radioed the captain, voice steady but urgent. "I'm heading back. Requesting escort." The response was quick. A squadron of helicopters moved into formation, cutting through the sky like guardian angels. Emily guided her jet toward them, the familiar shapes a welcome sight. Together, they formed a protective shield, watching for threats as she prepared for the final leg of her journey. As they neared the base, Emily's eyes scanned the horizon for danger. The enemy wasn't done yet. A lone fighter jet broke from the clouds, heading straight for her. Her pulse quickened. This was the moment she had trained for, the ultimate test of skill and nerve. She tightened her grip on the controls, locking eyes with the enemy pilot through the targeting system. The chase was on. High-speed maneuvers sliced through the sky, each pilot matching the other move for move. Emily's mind was razor-sharp, calculating angles, speeds, and timing. One wrong decision could mean disaster. With a sudden burst of speed, she gained the upper hand. Her missile locked on. She fired. The enemy jet exploded in a fiery ball, plummeting earthward. Relief washed over her, but there was no time to celebrate. The base was just ahead. The landing was smooth but tense. As the wheels touched down, the adrenaline that had fueled her began to ebb. Ground crew rushed her side, but Emily barely heard their voices. She was already thinking about the next mission, the next challenge. The war was far from over. The captain met her gaze as she climbed out of the cockpit. "You led today," he said quietly. "And you did it with skill and heart. This team is stronger because of you." Emily nodded, exhaustion and pride mingling in her chest. She had fought not just to survive, but to lead, to prove that courage and dedication knew no gender. And as the sun rose higher, casting light over the base, she knew this was only the beginning of her fight. The base was buzzing with activity, but Emily felt a rare moment of stillness. She stood by her jet, the early morning sun casting long shadows across the tarmac. The recent missions had taken their toll, not just on her body, but on her spirit. The weight of command, the constant danger, the lives depending on her. It was a burden she carried quietly. Yet, she never wavered. As she walked toward the briefing room, memories flashed through her mind. Faces of comrades lost, the sharp crackle of gunfire, the roar of engines slicing through the sky. This was the reality of war, a brutal dance between survival and sacrifice. Emily had learned that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the choice to push forward despite it. Inside the room, the SEAL captain waited, his expression serious but encouraging. "We've received new intel," he began. "Enemy forces are regrouping faster than we expected. Their supply lines are more resilient. We need a new strategy." The team listened intently. Emily's role was clear. She would lead the next wave of air support. But this time, the stakes were higher. The enemy had fortified their positions, and the mission would require precise coordination and split-second decisions. Emily's mind raced through every detail. She studied the maps, the enemy's movements, and the proposed tactics. Years of training had prepared her for this moment, but nothing could erase the knot of tension tightening in her chest. This wasn't just about hitting targets. It was about saving lives, her team's lives. Later, as she prepared for the flight, Emily's thoughts drifted to the quiet moments before takeoff. The hum of the jet, the cool grip of the controls, the endless sky stretching ahead. It was both a sanctuary and a battlefield. Today, she wasn't just flying, she was leading. The responsibility was immense, but she welcomed it. The engines roared, and Emily soared into the sky, the familiar rush of speed blending with a focused calm. The mission unfolded with a relentless pace. Enemy fire was heavier than before, flak bursting around her like deadly fireworks. She executed evasive maneuvers with precision, guiding her squadron through the chaos. Her voice over the radio was steady, issuing commands, coordinating attacks, and keeping morale high. As they neared the enemy's fortified base, Emily's heart pounded with urgency. The enemy had set up advanced anti-aircraft systems, and the sky was thick with danger. She adjusted her approach, leading the strike with calculated daring. Missiles streaked through the air, explosions lighting up the terrain below. But then, something unexpected, a sudden shift in the enemy's tactics. New fighters emerged from hidden hangars, swarming the squadron like predators. The battle turned fierce and personal. Emily locked onto a target, her hands steady despite the chaos. The dogfight was brutal, high-speed turns, near misses, and split-second decisions that meant life or death. Amidst the roar of engines and the flash of tracer rounds, Emily's thoughts sharpened. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a fight for every person counting on her back home. She pushed the jet harder, outmaneuvering her pursuers with skill honed by years of relentless training. Suddenly, a sharp jolt rocked the cockpit. A missile had grazed her jet. Warning lights flashed urgently. Emily's breath caught, but her focus didn't waver. She engaged emergency protocols, stabilizing the aircraft. Damage control became critical. The enemy was closing in, and she needed to get her team to safety. With steady hands, she guided the squadron toward an extraction point. The radio buzzed with frantic reports of damaged jets and low fuel. Emily's leadership shone brightest now, calm, decisive, unyielding. She coordinated the retreat, ensuring as many lives as possible escaped the trap. The return flight was tense and fraught with danger. Enemy fighters lingered, but Emily's squadron held together, fighting with desperation and resolve. As they neared friendly territory, relief began to seep into their voices over the radio. Landing was a mixture of exhaustion and triumph. The damage to her jet was clear, but the mission had been a success. The captain met her at the gate, his expression a mix of pride and concern. "You led them through hell and back, Lieutenant. You're the reason so many made it home today." Emily nodded silently, the adrenaline fading to a deep, tired satisfaction. She had faced the storm head-on, and though the battles were far from over, she knew one thing for certain. She was exactly where she was meant to be. The night was quiet, but Emily's mind was anything but. She sat alone in the dimly lit briefing room, staring at the mission map spread out before her. The recent battles had been brutal, each mission pushing her and her team to the edge. The enemy was adapting, growing more dangerous with every encounter. And now, the intelligence pointed to something bigger, a final push that could change the course of the entire operation. Her thoughts wandered to the faces of those she fought alongside. The SEAL captain, steady and unyielding. The men who had once doubted her, but now looked to her as their leader in the sky. Trust was hard-earned, but it was there. It weighed heavily on her shoulders. She knew the next mission could be the deadliest yet. Failure wasn't an option. The room was still when the captain entered. He placed a file on the table, the weight of the moment settling over them both. "This is it," he said quietly. "The enemy's command center. Taking it out will cripple their operations. But it's heavily guarded, more than we've seen before." Emily's eyes narrowed. The stakes had never been higher. She studied the layout carefully. The command center was nestled deep within mountainous terrain, protected by layers of anti-aircraft defenses and patrolling fighters. The mission would require precision, nerves of steel, and flawless coordination. Emily felt a familiar surge of adrenaline. This was what she was trained for. This was why she fought. The plan was clear but daunting. Emily would lead the strike team, breaking through the defenses to deliver a decisive blow. Every pilot and SEAL knew the risks. Every one of them understood the price they might pay. Emily swallowed hard but didn't show fear. Instead, she allowed herself a quiet moment of resolve. The next morning, the base was alive with tension. Emily moved through the preparations with practiced efficiency, checking her equipment, running through protocols, and mentally rehearsing the mission. The SEAL captain caught her eye and gave a brief nod, a silent show of confidence. It was all the encouragement she needed. The engines thundered as Emily's jet lifted into the overcast sky. The chill of the morning air bit at her skin, but inside the cockpit, her focus was razor-sharp. She led her squadron into enemy territory, weaving through the labyrinth of radar and missile fire. The sky erupted in chaos, tracer rounds slicing through the clouds like deadly ribbons. Emily's hands moved instinctively, guiding the jet through the deadly dance. Enemy fighters swarmed, but her squadron held firm. She coordinated with calm authority, her voice steady over the radio, directing attacks, calling for support, and maintaining formation. Every moment was a test of skill and endurance. As they approached the command center, the anti-aircraft fire intensified, flak exploding around them with terrifying force. Emily's jet shuddered, but she pushed onward, locking onto the target. She released the payload, watching the explosion ripple across the enemy base. Flames and smoke engulfed the area, signaling a critical hit. But the mission was far from over. Enemy fighters regrouped and launched a fierce counterattack. Emily found herself locked in a high-speed dogfight, the sky a blur of motion and danger. Her mind was clear, her instincts sharp. She outmaneuvered her pursuers, firing missiles that streaked through the sky like streaks of lightning. Suddenly, her jet shuddered violently, A missile had hit. Alarms blared as systems failed one by one. Emily fought to stabilize the aircraft, her hands steady despite the chaos. Damage control protocols kicked in, but the situation was dire. She radioed for backup, her voice calm but urgent. The squadron responded instantly, rallying to protect their leader. With incredible focus, Emily managed to limp the jet away from the battle zone, guiding it toward the extraction point. The enemy was relentless, but her squadron formed a shield of defense. The journey back was tense, every second a battle for survival. As the base came into view, Emily's heart pounded with relief. The landing was rough, but safe. Ground crews rushed forward, helping her from the cockpit. The weight of the mission lifted, replaced by exhaustion and a fierce sense of accomplishment. The captain approached, his expression a mix of pride and concern. "You led them through hell," he said quietly. "You saved lives today. We owe you everything." Emily nodded, her thoughts already turning to the future. The war was far from over, but she had proven herself, not just to others, but to herself. She was no longer just a pilot. She was a leader. And whatever came next, she was ready. The dawn light filtered through the hangar windows, casting long, golden beams across the polished floors. Emily stood quietly, the weight of recent battles still pressing on her shoulders. The final mission had been a brutal test of everything she was: skill, courage, endurance. But it had also marked a turning point. She was no longer just fighting to prove herself. She was fighting to protect those who depended on her. The base was alive with anticipation. Today wasn't just any mission. It was the one that could change everything. Intelligence had confirmed the enemy's final stronghold was vulnerable. Taking it out would cripple their operations and save countless lives. Emily's squadron was to lead the strike, backed by the SEALs on the ground ready to move in. The coordination had to be flawless. As Emily suited up, the familiar hum of activity surrounded her. Ground crews prepped the jets, pilots ran through last-minute checks, and commanders reviewed the plan one last time. The air was thick with tension, but also determination. This was the moment they had been preparing for, the culmination of months of relentless effort. Stepping into the cockpit, Emily felt the familiar rush of focus wash over her. The controls felt like an extension of her own body. Every button, every gauge was a part of the mission's heartbeat. The engines roared to life, and the jet surged forward, climbing into the overcast sky. From the moment they crossed into enemy territory, the battle was intense. Anti-aircraft fire erupted like deadly fireworks, shaking the aircraft violently. Enemy fighters surged in waves, determined to repel the strike. Emily led with unshakable calm, issuing commands, adjusting tactics, and pushing herself and her squadron to the limits. The ground below was a patchwork of smoke and fire as missiles found their targets. The enemy's stronghold began to crumble under the relentless assault. But as expected, the fight was far from over. The sky became a chaotic battlefield, tracers streaking in every direction. Emily's jet twisted and turned through the frenzy, every second demanding split-second decisions. Suddenly, the cockpit shook violently. A missile had struck, damaging the controls. Emily fought to keep the jet steady, her breath measured despite the adrenaline rushing through her veins. The radio crackled with updates. Several jets were down, but the mission pressed on. She refused to let this be the end. With steady hands, Emily guided the jet toward the extraction point, calling on her squadron to cover her retreat. The SEALs on the ground coordinated their advance, pressing forward now that the enemy's command center was crippled. The mission was a success, but it had come at a cost. Touching down was rough, but safe. Ground crews rushed to assist, their faces reflecting a mix of relief and exhaustion. The captain approached Emily as she climbed out of the cockpit, his eyes reflecting respect and pride. "You led with courage and precision. You changed the course of this fight." Emily nodded, feeling the weight of those words settle deep within her. She thought of the journey, from a quiet girl who had stood silently when the SEAL captain demanded a combat pilot, to the fierce leader who had flown through fire and returned to lead again. The battles had tested her in every way, but they had also forged her into something stronger. As the sun climbed higher, Emily looked out across the base. The war wasn't over, but today was a victory. A victory born of grit, skill, and unyielding determination. She had proven not just to others, but to herself, that courage had no gender. And as she prepared for the next mission, one thing was clear: she was ready for whatever came next.